Hey, what's going on guys, Khraze here, welcome back to No Man's Sky Companions. Let's take a look at some really awesome secrets and things that the game doesn't tell you at all. There's a ton still to discover about the new features in update 3.2, but we're kinda getting closer and closer to fully getting a grasp on everything that makes up the creatures, the pet system, and even more so that egg sequencer. By the way, before jumping in today's video, you still have time to take part in our February giveaway for a game of your choice. Simply follow the links down below, then choose the game from the list of games over there or by typing its name in the search box and then hit participate. From that point on, I will announce the winner in about 8 more days, both here on this channel as well as via the email address provided. As always, links down below, and another huge shout out to Instant Gaming for actually setting this up. Anyway, let's begin with the first tip on today's list, especially if you're like me and you find that the 6 slots dedicated for pets are simply not enough for the amount of cool creatures that you might have found in your journeys, and maybe you want a little bit more than that, maybe you want to expand a bit upon that. Well, there's good news and bad news. The bad news is that you can't really exceed the maximum of 6 creatures that you can hold in the animal companion screen, at the very least at the time of making this video. The good news is that there is a way to bypass that by simply making use of these creatures' offsprings, or to be more specific, their actual eggs. So let me just give you an example right here. As you can see, all of my slots are populated, but I already have eggs from some of these creatures as they did lay them a few days ago. So in this case, let's say I don't want this first model anymore, as I already have a few specimens of the same species. So what I would do in this case is I would make sure that that specimen already laid its egg, and as you can see, it is in my inventory, so I can safely discard the original model because I know I already have access to its offsprings in the form of that egg, which I can just keep it over there in my inventory and then only hatch it when I see fit in case I need it later. So in theory, you can hold up to 12 of these creatures at the very same time, 6 in the animal's companion and 6 in the form of eggs. Now personally, I would suggest only 11 or maybe even 10, as in clearing out one of the slots in the animal companion's registry so that you can hatch other eggs in the meantime as well. Moving on to number 2, another thing that the new update doesn't tell you is the rate of growth for your fresh-born babies, because you don't really have any timer for that. Well, I've been doing some testing and I've also asked around, I've also seen other people posting about this online, so here is how it works at the very least for the Steam version of the game, but it's likely going to work similarly on the other platforms as well. First of all, for a fresh batch of babies like these ones right here, in order for them to reach adulthood, you need about 1 full week for that to happen, as in 1 real-world week for that to happen. Now this can vary a little bit from species to species, but I've noticed that it's no longer than 1 or 2 days past that week, so it can sometimes be like 5 days, sometimes it can be like full on 8 or 9 days, but on average between these species it was around the week and a little bit, and this is the point at which they will become adults. Now from that point on, you will need another in-game week for them to reach their next stage and their final one, which is going to be, well, in this case, either maturity or even become elderly. And that is where everybody will completely stop. They won't change physically too much from adults to elderly. It seems that they pretty much retain everything in terms of aspects and even their stats. And even if you like put the game ahead 6 months from that point on, they do not die at all, so you don't have to worry about any of that. But since we were on the subject of aspect, let's also talk about coloring, because we finally nailed down at the very least a few of the interactions that you can have with the egg sequencer. And I will also give a huge shout out to Nanite God over on Reddit, because he also posted his results and they pretty much coincide with mine, but there are a few differences that I will mention here in this video. So in general, here are some of the items that I found to do a great job at recoloring your entire creature, including of course the carbon, the uranium, also ammonia and antimatter seem to have a great effect on that, though I will also say that, for example, in the case of carbon, it's going to be a little bit more different than its upgraded version, the condensed carbon, and the same goes with the sodium and sodium nitrate. They kind of do the same thing, but they will differ a little bit in terms of the shades of the colors and the combinations you can get out of them. So to increase the sample size as much as possible, here are all of my pets. So using the ammonia, yeah, it's going to fully color them in green. As a matter of fact, this is the greenest you can get them right now. There's other shades you can get with different sources, but ammonia fully colors them in green and doesn't really let off any other types of colors unless it's some kind of accent. Now the same goes with the carbon. This is going to make them fully red. In some cases it might add a little bit of blue over there, which by the way is going to be quite different than if we were to compare it with condensed carbon, which does still provide that red coloring, but it's going to be with a different shade of green instead of blue that it is with the regular carbon. Now we also tested something like uranium, and if you want purple, uranium is the one for you, but by far my favorite has to be the antimatter, because this is the way to come out with these really awesome snowy white looking kind of accents on your character. So if you want something super unique, this is probably gonna be the one for you. Now unfortunately I was pretty disappointed with the gold one because it just ruins the color on many of these creatures, with the exception of the exotic ones that do get some really interesting glows right there. Like this one did get some really nice orange crystal on its back, but again the regular creatures will have a completely different reaction to the colorings compared to the exotic ones, like these stone crabs that were added in a couple of updates ago. Also, by the way, with the sodium, this is the result right here. It's something that's kind of akin to an orange/brown, so these were the typical results that I found to be more, let's just say, inspiring. The other ones were pretty lame, and that's why I didn't include them here in this video, but I will definitely update a file with all of my discoveries. Moving on next, a thing that we didn't get a chance to cover in yesterday's video is the effects of different materials on your creature's personality, especially when using the egg sequencer. And thanks to JR89 over on Reddit, who did a really extensive search right here, we can finally see a full list of all of the interactions, but I will also go over a few experiments that I did for myself as well, especially when it comes to completely changing the personality that you might not like over your creature. Like, let's just say it's too playful and you want it helpful, maybe it's too aggressive and you want it too tame. Well, here is the thing about that. You can also decrease a certain stat by just increasing the opposite of it. So here is an experiment that I did with one of these creatures that I had. So as you can see, this rock creature that I initially had about 19% into helpfulness. Now normally what you would do in this situation, you would add something like, for example, cobalt to further increase that helpfulness by another 20%. But if instead you had, for example, playfulness from a different kind of source, that is going to subtract from your existing helpfulness, and if it is close to 0, for example, it can go in the completely opposite way. So in this case, we know that the variation is going to be 20% and the helpfulness was only 19%. So what happens if we add 20% into playfulness? Well, that subtracts 19% from the helpfulness and it adds that 1%, the difference from 20 to 19, into playfulness instead. So yes, it can absolutely go the other way around and kind of go below 0 in this case, as in it would downgrade into the different stat. So what this means is that you can also use the vice versa to, for example, turn playfulness all the way down into helpfulness, and this will work with the other two stats below it as well. And this brings us to the final point on the list, and definitely my favorite. You can pretty much increase the size of your own pets to extreme levels, way beyond the capabilities of the base game, by simply doing one thing, and that is increasing the hormone levels of your creatures over subsequent generations. So essentially, every new generation, go ahead and pump that egg with a ton of growth hormones, hatch it, and when it lays another egg, pump that one again to extreme levels, and in about like 5 to 10 generations, you're going to add at least a few meters and a few hundred kilograms over your initial creature, to the point that if you go to extreme levels in about like 10 to 15 generations, you're going to end up with something like this. Absolutely massive. And in this case, I have a dino that started from about 3.4 meters and now it's over 10, and I also got another one that is over like 12 at this point, I'm pretty sure that I can bring this to even higher levels, but I'm not really sure if there's any cap on the height and the weight limit, at the very least not at the current time. So go ahead, do this if you really want a ginormous being like this one. But thank you so much for watching. As always, this has been today's video. If you enjoyed it at any point, don't forget to comment, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.